All right, welcome back to the Elias Macko Show. Now, as we approach the summer season, the ever-growing problem of homelessness and drug use in Montreal city streets seems no clearer to being resolved. Not only are accommodation resources for the most vulnerable overflowing, but their distress and drug usage is more present on streets and on public transit and metro stations than ever. Organizations calling on the establishment of a real 24/7 model to help resolve the problem. We go now to Glenn Castanheira, Executive Director of Montreal Centre-Ville. Glenn, welcome back to the program.
Good morning, Elias.
Now, listen, I want to tell you something. I'll tell our listeners something. You know, I follow you on social media. You've been coming on this show now for years. You've always seemed to me to be a guy that is compassionate and caring, center left probably, but please correct me. I doubt you're a communist and I doubt you're alt-right. I think you're somewhere in the middle, okay? So you seem well-meaning and centered and rational, okay? And I saw your commentary on this story about the expectations for this summer. And I saw your concerns that you feel that we're repeating policies in cities like Vancouver and San Francisco, and we're going to end up in a bad place. Tell me about that, Glenn. Well, tell me about your concerns.
Well, first of all, I do confirm I'm not a communist nor a fascist. I like to think. Yeah. I do like to consider myself a pragmatic, and I think that's if we follow that guideline, we can try to find solutions to our issues. One of those issues being the homelessness situation in Montreal. And the way I bring it up, and mind you, I'm not the only one. There are many, many actors around the table discussing. I was actually just having coffee with the mayor's chief of staff, and this was one of the topics we were having. It's a major concern for them as well. So when you look at it with pragmatic eyes, the truth is that if the situation gets out of control and out of hand, you fall into a vicious circle, a spiral that only aggravates the issue and makes it worse for everybody. And to illustrate this, let's use Vancouver. The situation got out of hand because the city and decision makers started tolerating the intolerable. The intolerable being that an area can be completely used as a permanent encampment. With those, this with good intentions and with compassion. And that's something we've been doing here in Montreal forever. But compassion reaches a dead end when either the economic survival of the actors are in play or the very safety of those who cohabitate with these populations are at risk. And what I mean by that is, and the good example of this is here in Montreal, I did this myself when I was in the restaurant business, but most restaurants do this. They will always open their doors to the homeless population. When it's cold, they go in and they keep warm. When it's hot, they go in and keep cool. When they're hungry, they give them something to eat. They use the bathroom. This is the unwritten ecosystem that we have and works great when there's a nice balance. But when the business is unable to operate because someone is defecating in front of the door, and I'm sorry to say this on air, but that's what's happening now, defecating in front of the doors, mental crisis, going in and breaking things, scaring off the clientele, but that very same business has his empathy confronted with his survival instinct of being alive, having his business alive. And he won't just turn into a non-for-profit. He will close because he cannot be profitable and leave. And ironically, that very unofficial first-line service that was existent then disappears. And with it, the money needed to fund the already underfunded projects and initiatives that we have to support our homeless population. So it's kind of the perfect storm that we see and kind of where we're heading in some areas. And that is, to my opinion, perhaps the biggest threat that we have for downtown's vitality.
Glenn, the way I hear you talk about the issue here, it makes perfect sense to me. It's so common sense. What happens, whether it's the mayor's chief of staff or anyone else you talk to an actor in the city that says, no, we need to double down on the compassion. Why do you think that argument you just made doesn't resonate at times with the people in charge?
And does it resonate? I don't want to speak for them. I think everybody has a different perspective, but I like to think, Elias, because it's a very sensitive topic. It's very taboo. there's a very thin line between being a pragmatic and wanting to just, chase off misery and homelessness. It's very easy to be considered, heartless and just wanting to chase these unfortunate souls out of the city. And this goes for pretty much any debate. I mean, you see it on your own air. It's very difficult to have a reasonable conversation. Mm-hmm. You're either for or against. It's black or white. And so it's so sensitive that many rather not have this discussion publicly. And mind you, I'm going to get some backlash for this very conversation because I often get accused, we all know that businesses just want the homeless to disappear, which is, I find very insulting because, again, most of these businesses are the very front line. And it's not their job to be social workers. They do so because they have a heart and they care.
Yeah. But it's not unlimited. It's just not unlimited, right? Which, as we started off this conversation. So we're Glenn Castanheira from Montreal Centre-Ville. So Glenn, if sometimes these discussions can't change minds here, what about looking at those other cities, as you mentioned, San Francisco, Vancouver? Aren't they looking at what's happening in those cities and saying, well, listen, maybe we shouldn't try exactly what they tried? Why isn't that resonating?
Yeah, and I still haven't put my finger on it. I myself still don't understand why that is. I mean, I guess part of it is because you can't, people often say, well, you can't compare apples with oranges. They don't have the same governance. It's not the same climate, la-di-da-di-da. Yeah. But I'll compare it with housing, Elias. The housing crisis we're seeing in Montreal started in Vancouver. It started west and migrated east. We saw this coming over a decade ago, and yet here we are. Uh-huh. So I like to think that it's whatever justifies how we didn't really plan for this housing crisis in Quebec and specifically Montreal is perhaps the same reasons that we're seeing now that the homelessness situation is getting out of hand. And mind you, we are nowhere near what we're seeing in Vancouver, nor in Calgary, nor in Edmonton. I mean, Calgary, Edmonton, Ottawa, Toronto, Winnipeg, those are all cities that are having dramatic issues with homelessness to the point where, again, it's whole areas are no-go zones, and nobody stays downtown longer than they have to. We're not there yet, but we're starting to see the signs of that coming very quickly.
Your thoughts on initiatives to make drug use more comfortable? So in the STM in the Metro, they started to put boxes in so you can dispose of your needles properly, right? Mm-hmm. And obviously there's been a lot of work on safe injection, safe inhalation sites, and that kind of thing. What are your thoughts on initiatives like that? Do we know if they work yet?
And so we don't know if they work yet. I've spoken to a few experts on the matter, especially health experts. And it seems to be that the biggest positive impact is that it helps save lives, the lives of those users of these drugs. And I think, if that's an objective, that's quite important. And so therefore, I'm guessing it works. Where it doesn't seem to work is that it seems to normalize a behavior that should not be tolerated. And to illustrate this, Elias, I'm downtown every single day. We've seen a lot of things happen downtown. What I've never seen before is how unbothered drug dealers are to deal in broad daylight in the middle of the street. I see it daily. I speak to them. I converse with these dealers that aren't all aggressive. To them, they're running a business. And I asked him, and the latest guy I spoke to, and this is word for word what I said. He was selling drugs, broad daylight, kids walking around near Peel Metro Station, and I told him, that's real slick, man, being ironic. And his answer to me is like, yeah, man, we don't hide anymore. We don't have to hide. And that was his answer. Wow. And I think that's, when it becomes normalized that you can deal drugs in broad daylight, I don't know. Is it due to these practices of centers of inhaling? I don't know. But I really don't think they're not associated. And I think you had on there, it was one of your colleagues, there's a safe injection site in the eastern part of downtown, not part of our territory. And we heard some residents of a non-for-profit that, built an affordable housing complex there, saying that they cannot take it anymore and are being treated like they're gentrifying the neighborhood. Could you imagine having an affordable housing complex being accused of gentrifying because They're fed up of mental health and drug addiction victims entering their buildings.
Well, that's the thing, Glenn, that we've reached the stage where people that actually just want to go to work and live life, pay taxes, and live right, they're gentrifiers. I mean, that's the crazy part. Glenn, got to leave it there. Always a pleasure talking to you.
Thanks for having me.